Good afternoon, and welcome to the International Center of the Focolare movement at Rocca di Papa. Good evening to anyone following us from the time zones in Africa, the Middle East, Asia, and Oceania. And good morning to those who got up at dawn to follow us from the Americas. Welcome to the Link Up. I'm Annalisa. I work at the communications office here. I am a journalist. I'm married, and I have a 7-year-old son. Today is December 13th, the Feast of St. Lucy, a Christian feast day that is celebrated in many of our countries. It's a day that symbolizes the light that overcomes darkness, and it seems like a metaphor for the times we're living in. In fact, it feels like we're going through a dark night, with the pain and suffering that the COVID has brought, with the death of people close to us who perhaps we weren't even able to say goodbye to, with the economic difficulties we're experiencing in our families or communities, and with some emergencies that have emerged or been worsened by the pandemic. Light that illuminates the night. We'd like to tell you about some of those lights, small experiences from everyday life, but also important global events that give us great hope for the future. We're going to start with one of these, the Economy of Francesco, an event commissioned by Pope Francis. From the 19th to the 21st of November, 2,000 young entrepreneurs met via live streaming, together with many experts in the economic, political, and social sectors to build inclusive and sustainable models and to make concrete proposals for a better future. 3 days live from the Basilica of St. Francis in Assisi. Now let's hear from Catalina, Jaina, and Amin, who led the live event and were interviewed by Lorenzo Russo.
My name is Catalina from Ecuador.
I'm Jenna from the Philippines.
I'm Mohammed Amin from Algeria.
Welcome to Assisi. This is Economy of Francesco.
What is the Economy of Francesco and when did it start?
The Economy of Francesco started when Pope Francis sent a letter to young people, asking that we find a new economic model together. Not only one model, but several economic alternatives that already exist in the world or that can exist. We young people wanted to respond to his call and decided to get together and start talking about these economic alternatives, to get away from an economic model that exploits people and that does not focus on human beings.
We are here in the chapel of Frati Ilia of the Basilica of St. Francis of Assisi.
We split into what we called villages, in which different groups looked at different subjects.
The result of the months spent working together in the villages are the 12 points that we identified.
They are very important points. The abolition of tax havens, the stewardship of common goods, the right to decent work for all, quality education, and the introduction of an independent ethics committee in every bank.
In my opinion, these 12 points are clear and say exactly where we want to go.
hay tiempo de cambiar, tiempo de cambiar. Sé que sin perdón no hay paz. Reconcíliase en la verdad, puede sanar heridas. Yo sé que la última palabra no la tendrán quienes aplastan, que el amor viva en nuestra vida es la mayor justicia. Voy a calmar esta sequía, voy a regarla cada día con el amor, como lluvia suave, sutil y constante.
In quei giorni dell'evento abbiamo avuto quasi due.
During those days, there were almost 200,000 views, which is a lot because we only expected 2,000 people to come for the March event.
We are here, we would like to continue with you. We don't leave you alone with the whole organized committee. At first, thank you to Pope Francis, Papa Francesco, who believed, who trusted us, trust you as young people for this movement of economists and entrepreneurs. And finally, thanks to St. Francis. The Economy of Francesco, of course, has 8 centuries, but is still to come, because it's the economy of the present, it's the economy of the future, it's the economy of you.
Ciascuno di voi, a partire dal posto in cui opera e decide, può fare molto.
Each of you, starting from the places in which you work and make decisions, can accomplish much. Do not seek shortcuts, however attractive, that prevent you from getting involved and being 11 wherever you find yourselves. No shortcuts. Be 11. Roll up your sleeves.
Sporcarsi le mani.
Il messaggio del Papa è un messaggio universale.
The Pope's message is universal because he's inviting everyone to be part of this initiative, to be committed to solving the world's problems. For me, the message is really strong, even about being creative. You have to understand yourself first, what you want to do in this world, and how to make your own contribution.
You heard stories from young change makers from all over the world. Which one impressed you the most?
I was struck by the little girl, who I would say is a great girl, that we heard in the session called Young Enough to Change the World. Her name is Lily, and she's doing an amazing job in Thailand. She is 13 years old and is very actively committed to ecology. This story really moved me a lot.
I have done a lot of work in the environmental field over the last 6 years.
6 years here in Thailand.
I've spoken with government representatives in Thailand, with many political decision makers and important brands.
Big brands and other companies.
I want to raise awareness about the use of plastic so people can choose more environmentally friendly solutions.
Solutions instead of using plastics.
Basically, what inspired me is hope for the future.
Is basically hope for the future.
There is a rule that can summarize all our commitment. It is the golden rule, present in all religions and shared by all people of goodwill. Do to others what you would have them do to you.
In his message to the young people of the Economy of Francesco, the Pope said, among other things, either you're involved or history will pass you by. It is a powerful invitation that the Pope is addressing to each of us now, in every situation in which we live. The stories we have heard and will soon see show precisely this, that every action, whether small or large, done out of love, can help to change our lives, the lives of people who live next to us, and that of entire communities. Let's watch.
One Saturday, just before the election, I was driving to Mass on a Saturday morning, and I noticed that a campaign sign had been vandalized in someone's yard. It was a big one that they had hand-painted. It was for the other candidate, not the one I support. But nonetheless, I felt so sad when I saw what had been done to his sign. I wished I had time to stop and offer to repaint it for him. Instead, I thought I could take him a box of donuts. So that's what I did. I pulled in the driveway, and with no little amount of fear, I got out of the car. He was standing there like this, surveying the damage, and was really angry. I told him what I had been thinking and said that I would like to give this to him since I couldn't offer to repair the damage on the sign that someone had done. And he told me all about how he felt about this election and how things were going. And then he asked how I felt. At this point, his wife came out and she said, "Look what those people are like," and started making some generalizations. And he turned to her and he said, "Well, you can't say that because she just brought us donuts." When we parted ways, we both had a lot more respect for each other. And I really feel this is the fruit of trying to live for a united world.
Ciao! मेरा नाम शालुम है और मैं कराची से हूँ और आज मैं आपके साथ अपना एक्सपीरियंस शेयर करूँगा। मेरा एक्सपीरियंस कुछ ऐसा है कि लॉकडाउन से पहले मैंने सोचा कि मैं साइकिल ले लूँ और उसके लिए मैंने पैसे जमा करना शुरू कर दिए। लेकिन फिर लॉकडाउन लग गया और जब भी मैं पापा के साथ बाहर जाता ज़रूरतमंदों को देख के मुझे बहुत दुख होता था। फिर मैंने सोचा जो पैसे मैंने अपनी साइकिल के लिए जमा किए हैं क्यों ना वो मैं ज़रूरतमंदों को दे दूँ। और जब भी मैं ज़रूरतमंदों को देखता और मैं उनको अपनी पॉकेट मनी से पैसे दे देता। ये मेरा छोटा सा एक्सपीरियंस था और इस एक्सपीरियंस को करके मैं बहुत खुश हूँ। थैंक यू।
We were supposed to get married on August 1, 2020.
We planned a fun and eventful wedding in my hometown with all of our friends and family. And then COVID happened and we were locked down indefinitely.
At first, we thought the quarantine wouldn't last until our wedding day. But it just kept on going, and finally we decided to get married despite the restrictions.
We were willing to give up all of our original plans. Our only hope was to have at least our parents there.
But with my dad in the States and Cheska's parents a 2-hour flight away, even that seemed impossible to achieve. So we decided to let go of everything and created a plan where it would be just us, a priest, and 2 witnesses, the bare minimum.
This made us appreciate the true essence of marriage, a holy union between the 2 of us and God.
If there's one thing our relationship has taught me, it's that when we let go and entrust everything to God, we gain much more than what we ask for.
Tell me about you, and I will be listening. Tell me all about you, and I will be listening. I will be listening. I will be listening.
Like Pao and Cheska, we know that many other young people have made the choice to get married in these complex times. Our best wishes to them. In the stories, we also heard Shalom, and like him, many of us during the pandemic felt that we had to review our lifestyle and intensify our witness of fraternity. An extraordinary communion of goods was launched in the movement, and with what has arrived, we have already managed to cover half of the requests for help, and priority has been given to the needs of the people and communities most affected by the pandemic. Thank you very much to everyone. If anyone still wants to contribute or to invite someone to contribute, you can see on www.focolare.org all the information to do so and also some news about how this action is being carried out. Last October 15th, in the Great Hall of the Lateran University, Pope Francis, together with other political, religious, and educational leaders, launched the Global Compact on Education, a worldwide educational pact to enable children and young people to build a world in peace and fraternity. The Focolare movement also participated in the preparation of the pact and embraced it with all the richness and newness of Chiara's educational vision.
Si parla di catastrofe educativa di fronte ai circa 10 milioni.
There is talk of an educational catastrophe, inasmuch as some 10 million children might have been forced to leave school as a result of the economic crisis caused by the coronavirus.
On the 15th of October 2020, Pope Francis drew attention to the alarming increase in the global education gap. This is how the Global Compact on Education began, a global, intercultural and interreligious educational pact to build a civilization of harmony and unity. The Pope put forward a global plan in 7 points, bringing the person back to the centre, listening to the voices of children and enabling their access to education, education on acceptance, education and politics as service, safeguarding our common home.
At least 3 important steps should be promoted. Putting at the centre the person who has the right to be educated and to be accompanied to maturity through many stages of life. Confidently planning medium and long-term initiatives by listening to the questions of both young and mature people. Dialogue between cultures and religions and enabling relationship to build a new humanism, having an inclusive vision. And in particular, we need to have the courage to form people who are willing to put themselves at the service of the common good and therefore are able to build a new humanity.
Nieves Tapia is the founder and director of the Latin American Center for Learning Solidarity Service, a worldwide educational network with hundreds of schools and millions of schoolchildren. Through the learning service approach, the child or young person learns by putting him or herself at the service of others and the community.
Quiere decir que los niños del jardín de infantes pueden.
It means that preschool children can learn the natural sciences by planting trees to help reforest the national park.
Que los chicos de la escuela Fiore.
It means that the educational track our school children follow promotes the rights of the local population, and that students at a technical school can design wind turbines to provide sustainable energy to the rural populations of their community.
In Hungary, Silvia Berini has been participating for 2 years with another 100 Focolare people in a course called Dialogue Among Consciences.
In the run-up to the parliamentary elections in Hungary in 2018, we realised how difficult it was to talk about political issues within the movement, or that people preferred not talking about it, so as to avoid clashes. We wanted to grow in our capacity for dialogue, so we created a new forum for dialogue. The aim wasn't suddenly to achieve a unified view of problematic issues, but to understand each other's motivations and intentions. I found that I was able to understand better my colleagues at work, my family, and the people around me. Then a year ago we launched another project in collaboration with the Sofia University Institute. We've called it the Sofia Network for Eastern Europe. Our members come from 10 countries between Russia and Slovenia, and the aim is to develop a capacity for relational thinking and foster a culture of dialogue in all fields.
The idea of a global educational pact was born from the dialogue between people with different histories, cultures and religions. As we hear from Jose Levi, a Jew, one of the initiators who brought this proposal to the Pope.
This interreligious educational pact was born after almost 7 years of contacts between José María del Corral and Enrique Palmeiro, the well-known journalist Enrique Zimmerman, and myself. We see on the one hand the overriding need to put an end to this phenomenon whereby millions of children around the world simply do not have educational facilities and become easy prey for extremists. And on the other hand, we have none other than Pope Francis, who can really be the fundamental unifying element of this great project.
How can we implement this educational alliance today? José María del Corral, Director of Escolas Ocorrentes, one of the promoters of the Global Compact on Education, sees its intercultural, interreligious, intergeneration aspects as its greatest strengths.
I believe that this educational pact launched by the Congregation for Catholic Education right in the midst of the pandemic is a huge opportunity for us. On the one hand, by using new technologies and bringing together young people who are inside and outside the educational system. On the other, by giving intercultural and interreligious lessons and courses, and as the Pope also asked, by bringing together adults, older people and young people.
One thing we have learned in these months of pandemic is that life, though with many more difficulties, cannot stop, neither ours nor that of the communities in which we live. It is all about how we do things and how we deal with situations.
I'm a registered nurse working in a respiratory ward in a hospital in Melbourne, Australia. When I found out I had tested positive for COVID-19, I was in complete shock and denial. I had always thought the transmissibility of the virus within the ward was slim to none, because we depended heavily on meticulous use of personal protective equipment. During my first week of isolation, I was restless. Then I began asking God why He had allowed this to happen to me. I remembered many past experiences at work which brought me peace. Once, while doing postmortem care, I was told to complete it quickly to minimize contamination. I thought to myself, but this patient is somebody's mother or sister or wife. Regardless of the COVID status, this deceased patient needed to be thoroughly cleansed and properly rubbed with care. At the end of my shift that night, I felt I had done the right thing and was able to sleep peacefully. Sometimes I overstayed inside a COVID patient's room for chit-chat, knowing the depression that many COVID patients experience at some stage because of prolonged isolation. I remembered feeling exhausted when my shifts ended, but I saw my tiredness as something to offer to God for the patients who suffered most. But then again, the thought, amidst all the efforts to love, why had I been rewarded with this deadly virus? I began to realize some things. God is love and full of mercy. And thinking of Jesus on the cross, there came an answer to this question with no answer. God has a greater plan for us. I may not see clearly His plan, and maybe in the future He will give me another trials, but never without the grace to handle it. I have found a new peace.
E hoje eu vim contar uma pequena experiência que eu vivi, ainda como Gen 3, do Dare to Care. No início da quarentena, eu queria muito ajudar as pessoas, só que eu não tinha nenhum recurso, nenhum dinheiro. Só que eu sempre tive uma vontade muito grande de doar sangue. Daí eu pensei, vou doar sangue. Então eu liguei para lá, desde a ligação para marcar até o processo de doação, eu estava imensamente feliz, que era uma coisa inexplicável, que vinha de dentro mesmo. Eu fui doar sangue, cheguei lá muito feliz mesmo. E eu soube que com uma bolsa, com poucos ml de sangue, eu podia ajudar até 4 pessoas. E eu fiquei, meu Deus, como algo tão pequeno pode se tornar tão grande assim, né? Frente a isso. E essa foi minha experiência.
When I heard that I had coronavirus, my whole world fell apart. By the time I got home, my children had already prepared the room for my isolation. I felt such a doubt and anxiety and sadness and fear for my family. A few days later, my children and my husband were tested positive. It was so difficult for us. There was so much medicine we had to take. It came to my mind the words of St. Paul who says, "He who has faith in God will win." So we also put this into the hands of God. In our area, we couldn't find the medicine that we had to take, and for us anyway, it was too expensive to buy. So we asked a relation who lives in the capital, and he managed to get the medicine to us. To our great surprise, when we opened the box, there were also all the medicines we couldn't have been able to buy. We experience that when we have faith in God, we see His wonders.
And now, a surprise. We have been given the chance to broadcast an exclusive preview from the TV movie dedicated to Chiara Lubich, which will be aired on Rai Uno, the Italian television network, at the beginning of January. This is a clip that we can watch courtesy of Casa Nova Multimedia, which made the film for TV, and it is for the exclusive use of the conference call, so we ask you not to broadcast it through other channels. This is followed by an interview by Stefania Tanesini with the star in the role of Chiara Lubich, Cristiana Capotondi.
Tutto è iniziato a Trento, durante la guerra.
Scappiamo! Maestra Chiara, perché ci bombardano?
In strada è pieno di morti e feriti, è un disastro.
Dobbiamo prepararci. Quello di oggi è solo l'inizio.
E Gino?
Dottor Lubich, giusto?
Ci conosciamo?
Ho solo paura di non vederti più.
Sarò un partigiano prudente, promesso. Tu devi pensare solo a laurearti in filosofia.
I nazisti stanno occupando la città, vuoi unirti a loro?
Same time. Guarda che sono nostri alleati e noi li stiamo tradendo. E adesso scusate chi è che ci sta bombardando? Gli anglo-americani e non i tedeschi.
Qualcosa di buono questa dannata sirena ce l'ha. Quando suona almeno so che vi trovo tutte qui.
È una ragazza un po' particolare, è appena arrivata dal sud.
Da dove la tirate fuori tutta questa gioia? Dalla borraccia. Sembra acqua, ma è grappa.
La tua compagna mi ha detto quello che fate per i poveri.
Chi ha la possibilità deve donare a chi ha più bisogno e così ci robustiremo. Sì, perché l'essere umano è pienamente felice solo quando accende il vero motore della sua vita, l'amore.
Qualunque cosa accada, resteremo sempre unite.
È una donna, figlia di un socialista, sorella di un medico comunista, partigiano e ricercato.
Tu combatti con i tuoi uomini in montagna e io con le mie donne in città.
Ci sono così tante persone che soffrono e noi abbiamo solo provato ad amarle.
E se la Chiesa vi dicesse che avete dato vita ad un'eresia?
With us today is Cristiana Capotondi, who plays the part of Chiara in the TV movie Chiara Lubich, Love Conquers All. Ciao Cristiana, welcome.
Buonasera.
Good evening, Stefania.
Cristiana is one of the most successful actresses in Italian cinema and television. She's much loved by her audience and is a very versatile actress, having played a variety of roles on burning issues such as the mafia, disability, violence against women, and now Chiara Lubich. Cristiana, how did you prepare to play this part?
Well, first of all, I read a great deal about Chiara Lubich, and I read many things she wrote. I discovered someone who was restless in a positive sense, someone who could not accept the idea of a city, a country, and a world that was suffering. And in her small way, starting off with a group of friends in an Italian province, she tried to respond to suffering with love. Then I tried to put myself in the shoes of this woman, this very young woman. And I looked for the spiritual aspect within Chiara, beyond a religious aspect that could be a limitation in some places for those who are not Catholics. Instead, Chiara, with her ecumenism, has always embraced everyone, and I looked for her there, where we are all understood.
Which Chiara did you choose to tell the story of, you and Giacomo Campiotti?
Giacomo wanted to focus on the nature of the starting point of this movement, which is still so alive and vibrant today. So it's about telling the story of the simplicity of a girl who, with her sweetness, her strength and determination, manages to involve a whole town, a whole city, then the entire nation, and then the whole world into her vision of universal fraternity. Chiara is not only a woman who expressed important values, but she's a woman who fought to make her dream come true. And this, in my opinion, is a beginning that can really trigger a sense of identification in the audience.
What has stayed with you about Chiara? Who is Chiara for you, having played this part?
I've taken Chiara's principle that the other person is me. I mean, the actual idea of the relationship with the outside world, as if the outside world were inside me.
Thank you, Cristiana. We're grateful. And we look forward to seeing you on the 3rd of January on Rai Uno in Chiara Lubich, Love Conquers All.
Thank you. Thanks, Stefania. Bye, everyone.
And now we are here together with Emmaus Maria Voce and Jesús Morán, President and Co-President of the Focolare movement. Thank you for being here. Welcome. With them, we would like to look back on this year 2020, a very unique year in our history. The prestigious Time magazine called it the worst year ever. It seems to us that alongside the pain, the great deal of suffering that we have seen this year, there's been something else. And we'd like to look at this year a little like leafing through a photo album, seeing some pictures that are meaningful for our life and for the life of the Focolare. Let's start with this one. Actually, this was not yet 2020. It was the 2nd of September 2019. But we believe the importance of the private audience you had with Pope Francis gave the social calendar of the Focolare movement, which begins in September, an extraordinary start. Jesus, on that occasion, the Pope invited us to continue carrying forward Chiara's prophecies. What does it mean to do that at this moment in history?
Come il Papa ha detto a Lopiano, io penso che tante delle profezie di Chiara sono ancora all'inizio.
As the Pope said in Lopiano, I think that many of Chiara's prophecies are still at the very beginning. But in some ways, if we think things through, I believe that these times are more suited to fulfilling some of these prophecies in the ecclesial and civil spheres. Because, as we can all see, a deeper sense of humanity is emerging, as well as an understanding of what the Church really is. I am also convinced that in order to fulfill these prophecies, we will have to establish partnerships with other ecclesial and civil entities.
Let's move on to another event of historic significance. Actually, we're jumping ahead a year because it's October 2020 and it's the visit of His Holiness Bartholomew I, the Ecumenical Patriarch of Constantinople, to the International Center of the Focolare movement to pray at Chiara's tomb. Emmaus, looking at this photo, you can sense a deep friendship between you and the Patriarch. That day he called you dearest sister. What did this visit mean to you?
Well, first of all, it was extraordinary because you only have to look at the photos to realise what an occasion it was, and also feeling truly loved as a sister by him, this personal and very privileged relationship. However, I believe it was much more than that, because it wasn't a visit to me, it was a visit from the head of a church from apostolic times, what a church, to the Focolare movement, to Chiara's work. A visit to Chiara during her centenary year. He said he was coming to pay homage to her, and he expressed his hope that we would be worthy of bringing Chiara's charism to the world, bearing witness everywhere to everyone, to the love that can save the world today.
And 2020 is also the centennial of Chiara Lubich's birth. We were in Trent for the inauguration of the exhibition Chiara Lubich World City. Since the opening of this exhibition, exhibits have multiplied around the world in various cities. Here's a photo that, from the architecture, already shows that we are in Nairobi in Kenya. And here's the ribbon cutting at the expo in Jerusalem. In this exhibit, a part was dedicated to the relationship between Chiara Lubich and the Holy City. At the end of January, on the 25th, the President of the Italian Republic, Sergio Mattarella, traveled to Trent. In his speech, he remembered Chiara in a simple but also a very profound way. He also added some personal memories. We thus discovered that he had known Igino Giordani personally. And then the pandemic arrived. The scenario changed. Our lives changed. Here are some symbolic photos that remind us, make us think about those days, posted on social networks by doctors, nurses, the sick, the many who did not make it. Obviously, in this situation, the centenary has also been transformed. The exhibit in Trent, for example, was enhanced by a virtual tour, and the one in Brazil took a different format because it went online on social networks. Now, Emmaus, looking at this centennial in the pandemic, which we're still living through, what meaning does this centenary have?
I believe the pandemic has taught us many things, and among these, it has reminded us of something that we'd almost unconsciously put as the title of Chiara's centenary, because we gave the title Celebrate to Meet. Now, the meeting, the living meeting with Chiara, cannot be limited even to 100 years, not even to a centenary year. It's not over, and it'll go on as long as there is someone from Chiara's family on earth who will continue to hold meetings to witness that Chiara is alive, that Chiara's charism still has something to say to the world.
Many other events of the Focolare movement have also gone online. The United World Week, for example, which our young people organized in the first week of May. This year, there were also 400 micro and macro events in 65 countries, all via web. And then the Mariapolises, the annual appointments of the Focolare, were also reinvented to be held online. And we keep on leafing through the album. Let's fly over to the Philippines. This flower, trying to emerge from the ash, was taken in the little town of Tagaytay, where the eruption of the Taal volcano buried a vast area in ash, including the Focolare little town, causing serious damage for miles around. And then there's another photo we've chosen. I think you'll recognize this one. It's the city of Beirut. It's unforgettable. The port area after the explosion on the 4th of August that caused over 100 deaths, thousands of injuries, and massive destruction in a country that was already experiencing a complex economic and social situation made worse by the pandemic. Jesus, we have talked about emergencies, and among the very painful emergencies that we've had to face this year in the movement, there's a particularly serious one. There have been some cases of child abuse caused by people in the movement. In some cases, these are things that happened a long time ago. In other cases, more recent events, and consecrated persons are also involved. In March 2019, you and Emmaus wrote a letter to all the people in the movement precisely to inform them that this scourge had also affected us.
Sì, purtroppo, come dici bene, dobbiamo ammettere che questa piaga degli abusi.
Yes, unfortunately, as you rightly say, we have to admit that this scourge of abuse, not only child abuse, but also abuse of authority and other kinds of abuse, has also occurred among us. In this sense, we would like to take this opportunity of a worldwide link to ask for forgiveness wholeheartedly, sincerely, of all the people who have been victims of any form of abuse. This is the first thing we would like to say 1 year after that letter.
Poi, ecco, siccome sappiamo che questo non è mai sufficiente, vorremmo...
Then, As we know that this is never enough, we would like to reaffirm our commitment to the work we are doing and that we want to improve more and more in terms of prevention and training so that these things don't happen anymore. Because they are so contradictory to what Chiara gave us that they really shouldn't happen anymore. And then we reiterate the accompaniment of the victims, which is the most important thing, and we hope to be able to do it even better, even more effectively.
Certainly. Of course. It's a suffering that we live together, that we take on together, all together, and only together can we overcome it, because it's a great suffering for everyone. I remember we wrote in that letter that every single case for us means a profound purification of the movement. And we consider it as such. We accept it. We said so, with humility and deep compassion for those who have suffered indescribable traumas, perhaps because of our lack of attention. And we commit ourselves to directing or refocusing our conduct as individuals and as a movement towards an ever more conscious and mature commitment to the safeguarding and well-being of minors in particular. But we added at the time, we stressed this in that letter, that we must also be careful to look beyond our movement because, of course, we want to contribute to the fraternity of all. And therefore we must take on board the cry of pain of all those who suffer abuse, especially children, but not only, children and young people of the world. And this attention must lead us to see all these people as the spouse we have chosen, as Jesus forsaken. So we should feel drawn to go and console this pain and to do everything possible to ensure that traumas of this kind do not happen again in future. This applies to the abuse of children and minors, as well as to all the other types of abuse, even of older people, disabled, of those who suffer abuse of any kind, of their rights, their personhood, their dignity. We should feel drawn to go and love and relieve these wounds, to respond as far as possible with our attention and love for the victims, for all those who suffer, and to ensure that these traumas never happen again.
While you were speaking, I was reminded of the commitment we have made this very year to care, which is this pathway towards fraternity designed by the young people, but to which we are committed with the whole Focolare movement and beyond, the Dare to Care. Among the examples of Dare to Care, of taking care, of reaching out to the extreme consequences of love, of hearing the cry of even those most suffering peoples, I think we all remember Miriam Lefebvre, who was a young person from the Focolare movement, aged 26, from France, who lost her life in an attack in Niger, where she, who had studied conflict resolution, had gone on a humanitarian mission.
This is what our Gen urge us to do, but our Gen are really spearheading what the whole movement feels. We cannot choose to love Jesus forsaken without looking for those who seem the least, the humblest, the most abandoned people on earth.
It's a key word for these times, taking care.
And thus, we've concluded this overview of 2020. But let's take a look at 2021, because at the beginning of the year, there will be the General Assembly of the Focolare movement, and your presidency will come to an end. If you had to summarize these 12 years as president in a few photos, which would you choose?
I would choose three. The first was in March 2008. The image of Chiara's funeral, the funeral at which the Church bore witness to the greatness of the charism, and not only the Church, but churches, as well as believers of various backgrounds, cultures, religions, who bore witness to the greatness and the influence of the charism on them. So that's the first thing. And that funeral, in my opinion, showed, well, I heard an experience yesterday of a young man who'd come there almost by chance, who met Chiara at that moment when she was dead, evidently when she was very much alive, because at that moment it was as though Chiara spoke to him and called him to follow her, so Chiara living at that moment. Then the images of all these 12 years that made me see Chiara living in her work, in her charism, that was spreading in the world in many, many actions of love, of solidarity, that Chiara's family showed to all the people they met in the world, and the witness of this love, of this charism of Chiara. So also those last ones that we saw during the link-up. And then the last one, that of Pope Francis signing the encyclical on fraternity, because it seems to me that this is exactly the culmination of what Chiara would have wished for, that a pope would promulgate to the whole world her dream, Chiara's dream, that is Jesus' dream, that all may be one. After all, this is also the reason why I chose to introduce Chiara's reflection right now, which is entitled Unity, precisely because Chiara presents unity to us in this way, that is, being close to everyone. Why? Because God sent Chiara's charism on earth. This is the word he wanted to say to the world. Unity, the word unity. Unity is a grace that comes from God. But God has been so good as to tell us what conditions he requires of us people so that he can provide this grace. And the conditions are mutual love. Love one another as he loved us. Not just any kind of love, but loving one another with the measure of Jesus forsaken, who showed us that he was ready out of love to give everything for us, everything for the love of humanity. So Chiara urges us to have this kind of love among us precisely so that this love we can then give to the world, our word, which is the word unity, which is what the world is asking to hear today and which it cannot hear if we do not put this mutual love into action among us, which attracts this grace. This is Chiara's thought that we'll hear now together.
L'unità. Ma che cos'è l'unità?
Unity. But what is unity? Can we achieve unity? Unity is what God wants from us. Unity means fulfilling Jesus' prayer. Father, that they may be one as we are one. I in them and you in me, that they may be completely one. But unity cannot be achieved through our own efforts. It can be accomplished only through a special grace, which the Father gives if he finds us prepared by living a precise and necessary requirement. We must live out Jesus' commandment to love one another, loving one another as he wants, which is not, as we know, simply a spiritual friendship or agreement or understanding. It means loving one another as he loved us, that is, to the point of being forsaken, to the point of complete material and spiritual detachment from things and from people, so that we can make ourselves one mutually and perfectly. By doing so, we will have done our part and fulfilled the condition for receiving the grace of unity, which will not be lacking, which must not be lacking. How grateful we should be at the thought of being called to this. How encouraged we are to do all we can to obtain this gift, which cannot be found where this is not lived. We must remember that there is an added grace in our communitarian spirituality, that heaven can open up for us in every moment. And if we do what heaven asks of us, being filled by this grace, we can do much, very much, for the kingdom of God. Conscious of this extraordinary privilege, this is why in the early days we expressed ourselves in this way. Fix just one idea in your mind. It was always just one idea that made great saints. And our idea is this: unity. Let everything crumble, but unity never. Always bring this blazing fire among you. And don't be afraid to die. You have already experienced that unity requires the death of everyone in order to give life to the one. Do this as a most sacred duty, even if it will bring you immense joy. Jesus promised the fullness of joy to whoever lives in unity. Let's get to work. This is what the Lord wants from us. He wants it through our charism, which has been inscribed in our statutes. Unity is the premise that comes before every other will of God. Then we can also speak in order to spread the gospel, but afterwards.
And we're coming to the conclusion of this link-up. In a few days, it will be Christmas.
Happy Christmas. Happy Christmas to you all. For sure, this Christmas, in a pandemic year, Christmas in the midst of a pandemic, we see terrible things, poverty to the point of starvation, and increasing hunger in many places. We see wars that are partly hidden, partly ongoing. We see climate disasters, changes that are putting our common home at risk. And so all this makes us say, Jesus came into this world. Jesus came, he became man and took charge of this world, and he came through love to show us his world. And so, on the one hand, it makes us feel humble before the greatness of this love and grateful to him who has shown us this love. And on the other hand, it urges us to do something like him. It urges us to look around, to reach out to everyone, starting with the most marginalized, the poorest, humblest, most abandoned. Migrants, those who are alone, the sick, children, all those in need. And he also urges us to love them with all that we can by sharing our affection, our thoughts, our communion of goods, and even taking risks at times, risking our lives as he did. And so this will truly be a happy Christmas. That is, a good Christmas, a Christmas of goodness, a Christmas that because it's goodness also becomes a Christmas of peace, hope and joy.
Thank you for this wonderful Christmas greeting. We are at the end of this link-up. The next link-up will be on Sunday, the 7th of February, 2021, and it will be a special link-up because it will be entirely dedicated to the General Assembly of the Focolare, which will end on that very day. Thank you for following this link-up, and on my part too, Merry Christmas.
Happy Christmas, everybody.
Happy Christmas.